through more judicious distribution of resources. The federal government has all the resources, about 90% in Pakistan. Both the provinces and local governments, through the provinces, share in this pool of 90%. The present practice of distributing current and development funds have led to regional disparities in levels of development and provisions, and this again comes back to the NFC award. We again come back to the NFC award, where we find there is total inequality when the awards are finally announced. The criteria of poverty levels in different parts of the country should have better capture the needs of population and should be the basis for distribution of resources. An independent and professional NFC can better address the situation than the highly charged political body we now have. We need to have professionals from all different segments of society, from different industries, rather than the politicians deciding what the NFC award will be. At the end of the day, we dole out the NFC award as you dole out charity. And that it is, at the end of the day, it's the political parties who are calling the shots. So we have to have a spirit of accommodation from the federal government and replace it with acrimony among the federating units. So, and most of my figures which I have quoted to you here were taken from the economic survey of 2004 and 2005.
Thank you. Some of the points that she has raised, very fundamental, relate to distribution of income and of asset distribution, including the regional inequalities that exist. I'd now like to request Qazi to say a few words.
I think that when you look forward to something like the Millennium Development Goals, it's actually a way of focusing your mind about what kind of society, economy or polity you want to see, because you're not obviously planning policies for 10 years from now. So you're looking at, it's almost like an envisioning exercise. So I really see this as an opportunity to ask what kind of vision we have for the economy, polity, society, and what is our perception as well as view of poverty now. What do you think? What do we think? Where do we think we should be 10 years from now? So when this whole discussion started about 5 years ago, it was thought that countries will sign up to these goals and there will be rapid progress, the people will make policies and so on. In Pakistan, actually during those 5 years we've gone through a lot of political and economic turmoil. We know that in fact, of course, there is a lot of contestation in terms of trends and numbers, but there is a lot of evidence to show that at least in the last 5 years, on the whole, the record has deteriorated. So we actually, if you say the Millennium Development Goals were set in the year 2000 to look ahead at what will happen in 15 years' time, the first 5 years, on average, we know have more or less, we have regressed. So we have to move forward. So when there is a lot of detail in that discussion, we can go into that. But let's actually look at the bigger picture and see what we can envisage and what we can envision. And I think that it's really an invitation to talk about structural issues, not about policy issues, not about whether we can do something this year to have higher growth or less growth, or to redirect growth and so on this year or the next year, whether we might have a drought or a flood, how that might affect things. But what is the longer term vision, or what are the structural issues? Now, one of those structural issues I'm very happy to say that my co-panelists have already talked about. I think that a key structural issue in Pakistan's economy, in the macroeconomy, and also an issue that generates poverty here, is the imbalance between civil and military economy, polity and society. So I think that by all standards of economic development and by standards of where we want to be in the next 10 years, I think we are over-militarized society, over-militarized polity, over-militarized economy. And there are lots of things to say about that. Partly it's issues like the defense budget, partly it is misplaced priorities and so on. So that's actually one structural issue we have to think about. These structural issues, by the way, we can't deal with them very easily. They're part of the structure and you have to ask what are the forces that will change them. But also at the micro level, now this is at the macro level, it's a big structural issue. Military, civil, democracy or not, defense expenditure, India and so on, America, God knows what else. But there's something to say about the micro level also. Where is our society now? Can we actually say something about what our society is? What are the factors in our society at the micro level? At the level of a village, at the level of an urban settlement, at the level of a city or a town, that we can see generate poverty or create opportunities for people to leave poverty. Okay, so what are those micro processes? And in that, my view is in sum that actually we have a very slowly changing social structure. For the kind of big changes that you want to see that other countries have gone through, countries like China, where you could say that okay, they have poverty over a period of 15 years. So if you want to have a comparative idea about what happens when you have poverty in 15 years, look at countries that have done it. And you find countries that experimented with different kinds of economic policies. They underwent different levels of sort of macro management, they underwent different issues in international relations. But the profound thing these countries did was actually they underwent enormous social transformation at home, at the micro level. So where is our society now, and things that we don't even want to talk about, things that we don't even recognize. Where are we now and where we might be? I think that at the micro level, and we do a lot of work on that, we do a lot of empirical research, our society is highly segmented. It is completely not a modern society yet, and there are a number of very important issues in the social structure that determine the pace of change. In some parts of the country, for example, in central parts of Punjab, in some other areas, caste hierarchies are very important. Okay? So, and we don't discuss them. We're sitting in a school of where we want to discuss social sciences. We work at a policy level. All of us work at a policy level. These are things that are never discussed. When you try to discuss them, people say, no, it's not an issue here. There are caste hierarchies. There are social networks and the way in which people organize things informally. Those are very strong. The way people organize things around biradaris, around castes, around tribes, and around other kinds of groupings. The way that markets function at the local level, the land market, the labor market, the water market, the credit market, all of these markets, they don't function in a vacuum. They also function in a social setting. And so that's really in a nutshell the empirical reality of where we are. Now if you ask who is noticing it and who wants to change it, and here is really where actually I think that we have a very serious problem in Pakistan. In Pakistan, we've had a lot of discussion and a lot of fighting about whether we have civil politicians or military dictators, whether we're friends with America or not, whether we want to be Islamic in our orientation or moderate enlightenment, whether we want to be friends with India or not. But there's hardly any discussion about the kind of social transformations that are required. And I think that unless we start doing that, unless we start addressing what our social structure is, what is it that in our social structure that underpins unequal land ownership? What is it in our social structure that creates conditions for things like bonded labor? What is it in our social structure that impedes certain kinds of people going to school, so kids from certain kinds of families going into school, and for ages, right? So what are these things that are slowing us down in the cities, in the towns, in the villages? Until we start addressing them, I don't think we really have a right to say what will things look like in 2015. I think unless we're looking at the big picture at the micro level, the big changes, I think that it's very hard to imagine what life would be like in 2015. I think we'll just be, having more of the same then. So I think that for me the big question is that what are the transformative agendas, and why didn't we have them in Pakistan ever? There were exceptions, there were periods of time and there were places where these kinds of transformations did take place. There were moments of intense political activity when lots of people became enfranchised and things changed. But overall, if we look at the record, actually much of this work has to be done. So if you compare yourselves with China or even parts of India, even countries like Iran, forget